we have to clarify, like, what is the purpose of the strategy session? It's sure, yes, you could say it's to get the client on board. It's this, but for starters, it's for you to qualify that this is someone that you want to work with, right? I've definitely made this mistake where I had to fire a client later, happened before, or I've been miserable through the experience because I came from a place of neediness, wanting the progress, wanting the money, that I took someone on that I knew I shouldn't have. And hopefully you're not in that place. And I know so many coaches that have. It's just a horrible experience. But it's just to remind you that the purpose is for you to qualify this is someone that you want to work with. But also is on a bigger scale is you have to think about this. You are trying to paint a picture for the customer. Okay, so regardless of what type of coach you are, right? Ultimately, people are not paying you for you; they're paying you for a result. They're paying you for an outcome. Okay, and it gets a little bit contextualized based on the type of coach you are, and this is why people get confused in the industry when they're like, "You need this one singular result. Like it has to be this one thing." Like, sure, if I'm a health and fitness coach, and maybe my thing is around weight loss. Then that's fine. And, maybe it's a certain weight or a body fat or like whatever it is, like you have a pretty clear outcome and you can kind of guide the conversation towards that. Right. But maybe if you're a relationship coach, there's elements of intimacy, there's trust, there's love, there's connection, there's empathy, there's reciprocity, there's support. Like there's so many things that come up that I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to think that you're like, here's this one result that I will help you get. Like it's a multitude and a variation, and the summation of that gives you kind of this ultimate grand result, right? If you're a general life coach or even as us as high performance coaches, I'm like, well, we focus on productivity, persuasion, psychology, physiology, purpose. Like there's so many different elements that it's not per se that someone is coming to you for one specific thing. So the reason I'm sharing all this and whatever type of coach you are and wherever you are in your journey is to start thinking about, okay, well, what are the avenues or the things that it can help someone with? Okay. And what does that kind of sum up to? If you thought about like, well, I can help them with this result, I can help them with this outcome, I can help them achieve to have this thing or be this type of person, whatever it is. Because when you have that, like you need to start with that level of clarity initially before you go into the call. Because if you think about it, mistakes that people will do in a strategy session, they'll get on with someone and they'll solve every single problem, every single thing that comes for someone. Because they're like, I'm good, I want to help them, I want to over deliver, and like this is amazing, and like let me do that. The problem with that is you've kind of just solved everything for them and you set yourself up for like, okay, well, like that was good. Like the client was like, well, there's not much more left for me. Like, thank you. That's amazing. And where I'm trying to get at is part of your goal. And this is where there's a shift that has to happen mentally is you're trying to identify, if I simplify, a gap, and you're trying to add and imbue certainty that you're able to fill that gap for them. Okay. Yeah. And what I mean by the gap is, for instance, a lot of times I get folks that come to me, like the big things about being productive, right? So imagine a high performance coach, someone comes to you like, yes, help me productive. Like I want to be ninja. I want to be a SWAT team. I want to make a ton more money. I want to blow things up, right? But what they don't realize and what I have to draw out in the session, that productivity isn't the singular thing that we focus on. It's interconnected because based on where they're at, they need levels of influence and persuasion, to be able to get their team, whoever they work with to support them, to help them be more productive, right? They need massive elements of courage to say no to false obligations, to move past, process pain, loss pain, like all these fears that come up that they don't even know that exist, right? We need to focus deeply on clarity because if they don't know who they're trying to become and who they live into and what's meaningful and what's this, right? They don't know how to connect to purpose. Well, it's hard to be consistently and meaningfully productive because most people just end up busy. Like I'm showing you how, like I'm trying to explain that I'm like, well, it's not just productivity, it's all these other things. So if I'm going through the strategy session, I'm not solutioning all the productivity things. Like, I'll help and I'll share and, I'll give a tool or tactic. Like I always want them to have something they can action and work with. But just for time's sake and stuff, it's not about that. But I'm trying to show them the gap of, hey, you're trying to improve productivity. Like, yes, we'll get you there. But there's also all these other things that will explode what you even thought productivity was possible. And I hope as you listen to this, I'm trying to show you like, oh, wow, like, oh, yeah, this. And then we talk about energy. Like people don't talk, like if you're dead, like when I was dying through recovery, I'm like, my productivity, like it was the hardest time. Like it actually, for the first time, work felt like work. I'm like struggling to just show up. And the point of it is, I'm like, well, people don't think about, well, how do I use my body, my physiology? So the point of it is, I'm trying to show the gap. Yeah. Because ultimately, the person who's going to sign up and pay me is going to sit there and like, oh my God, like I need to do this and this, and like, and I want this and I want this and I can't do it on my own, right? I need some expert guidance, right? So in it, when you think about strategy as a discovery session, through your process, whether you have something or you're just building your process, you need to have discovery type questions where you start super high level, right? Like way up mountaintop. And then you go a little bit deeper because you're trying to figure out like where are gaps in their life. And you have to be able to transfer the certainty to show them that you're able through your process, your framework, your coaching, your stuff, like whatever it is, that you're able to bridge that gap. Okay. So that's the second piece I want to mention. Then you bridge, and I'll just keep bridging off of these. The third piece, and I think this is kind of up there, is the idea of future pacing. Okay. So if you just write the word future pacing, and what future pacing is you have to help the client see the images, and as Faisal was mentioning, like when he was talking about, like, if you haven't got your colleague to visualize, like you need that, you do need that, and I'll explain that, and don't freak out on it. It could be very simple. Is they need to see in their mind the positive outcome of doing the change or achieving that thing or having that breakthrough or wherever they're trying to go. So if someone is, I don't know, if someone is, overweight and they want to lose weight, and you're coaching them through the session, you're like, well, have you ever thought about what it would look like when you actually go into the bathroom and you look in the mirror and you just have a big smile on your face because you can't stop looking at a damn sexy son of a gun just staring right back at you, right? And what they'll tell you is they're like, no, I've never thought about that. And I'm like, when you start helping them articulate that and see that, it drives emotional connection. So they feel emotional certainty. It's an element of how you raise the certainty. So it drives their emotional certainty. They also get excited, and it creates way more necessity for them, right? When you think about someone who's, like whatever the thing that you're trying to help them with, you have to guide them. You could just ask them questions. You don't have to be a superstar. You could just like ask them, what would it look like if you were able to do X, Y, and Z, or to be here, or what would be different? How would you feel? Or, if maybe you guys didn't fight 22 times a day and you only fought twice, like what would that allow you to do? What would that feel like? Right? And they're like, I don't even know what that feels like. And you're like, yeah. And you start getting them to experience and feel what this positive outcome. So similar to what you did. See, now you're role modeling it in a sense. Similar to what you did before going into the session, you're envisioning the positive outcome. You're trying to get them to do the same thing in the areas that are specific to what you work with, right? And that's the concept of future pacing, where if I could simplify it, here's the rocket ship, put them in the rocket ship, fly them here, be like, this is what life could be like, get them to feel it, and then come back. And now there's this gap, and you're like, I can help you get there, right? And I emphasize the importance of this because people get weird that like, oh, Anas, like sounds manipulative, or or like I'm doing this ninja jujitsu, and I'm like, no, like this is how you serve someone, because they won't buy or commit or invest with you if they have no idea why. And what happens is the trap. If you're not doing these things, I promise you, and I will bet everything that you will get. Well, now's not a good time, or they'll tell you at the end that like when they got all these projects coming up, or they say, they'll give you a money thing. They'll say they have to check in with someone, or they'll say, well, what about next quarter? Or they'll say that was really good. That's all I needed. You'll get all these stalls, all these smoke screens, all these things that come up that are automated, and people like freak out about it, and they try to handle it. And like, I don't know how to deal with objections. I'm like, well, it's never the objection. It's all these things that you missed in advance. Because if someone, okay, and here's a way that I encourage anyone here to think about is, imagine you had a client, a prospect, they got in a strategy session with you, and by the end of it, they sat there and they're like, wow, I am here. There is all of this that I could achieve and I can go to and I can work towards. And it seems like a long journey, but this person can really help me get there. Like it would be insane, right? To not want to commit with someone and go through that journey rather than them trying to figure it out on their own. Is that making sense? I can geek out and I can keep going. Actually, I just want to check in.
I love that. Can I share what you shared from a different language, from a different standpoint? Because I love what you're describing, and I was trying to put myself in the position of when I was starting out and I was hearing this, and it was like all sorts of triggers around this. It's like, okay, what am I doing? And you shared a little bit of it because we have our own objections around it. It's like, oh, why would I want to do that? Because I want to deliver the most amount of value, and I don't want to sell them anything. Or if I do, I want them to
Just jump at me.
Jump at me, basically, which can happen, by the way. That's possible. But not all the time. It's happened to me 3 times in 6 years of coaching. So where before I got to the end of the conference, like I'm in. What's like, can we make this happen? They didn't even want to know the price. Like what? But that's you can't rely on that. Fully, at least. Maybe Anas disagrees with that, but we'll get to that. So I want to talk about what like Anas talked about gap and then future pacing. So the way I look at it from my perspective is the gap is the pain and the future pacing is their vision. And here's why it's important, because I always had this challenge in my mind, like, why am I getting them to see it, to feel pain here? I don't want that for anybody. Like, I don't want people to be in pain. Like, in fact, the whole reason why I want to be in coaching is because I want to help alleviate their pain and not give them more pain. But here's the problem. And everybody knows this, like when you actually look at your day-to-day life, notice the people around you, most people avoid feeling pain. So what do? They distract themselves. They go on their phone, they go watch TV, they go talk to people, they do like anything that would get them. And when I say pain, I mean psychological pain, I mean emotional pain. And that could be the pain of lack of clarity, lack of energy, not feeling like they're enough, not having all sorts of fears that they don't know how to deal with. So emotionally, they don't know how to process that. They haven't been taught that. So what they've trained themselves to do is bypass that and just focus on like just in the environments that we live in. It's not a wonder. It's not a coincidence that it's filled with these kind of distractions. In fact, it's only sustainable with those distractions. Otherwise, we're going to have an epidemic of psychological challenges here. So, but what we're doing essentially with the sales process is we're helping them go towards something that their mind wants to avoid. Mm-hmm. And that process is hard, but it's necessary, because unless they can experience that, unless they see what the challenge actually is versus what they might think it is, you can't build enough necessity there. Right. They won't give them enough value.
And so I'll kind of bring another analogy to it and literally talk about physical pain. Like the purpose of pain or the reason why we have a physical pain is because it is a signpost. There is something wrong in our body. And the point of a painkiller is a painkiller doesn't fix the problem. It just fixes the symptom that there is a problem temporarily, and so if you take too many painkillers, you never fix the problem, and you're in denial that you need to go to the physical therapist to get, whatever, or surgery or whatever the situation is. But, painkillers are not the permanent solution. And that's basically what we tend to do, and what your clients are doing. What I do in my own life at times is, we experience pain and we just grab the closest thing that's going to help us, quote unquote, alleviate it for the moment. And so you're doing your client a disservice if you let them continue to take painkillers when they really need to face the pain and figure out where it's coming from and the reason why, and actually get to the source, the origin of the pain.
Yeah. And as soon as they get that, you don't need to convince them that, this program is like, they feel it. Right. This is probably the first time they ever feel it. And then the future pacing part I love and that's where their vision. I had a session yesterday with this young woman. She's like part of our family, and she had this, I've known her thinking about being a writer for the longest time. And I know her thoughts around it too, because I talk to her all the time. And she's like, that's like, I want to do all this stuff. It's not that practical. I'd rather go to medical school. And she finally got the courage to apply for an English major, and she wanted to go creative writing classes, but she felt guilty. Nice. She felt guilty around it. And then I was like, you know what, this needs to get tipped. So I just got her on, we actually had a conversation face-to-face for close to 2 hours. And the thing that was so powerful in there was that she couldn't see the possibility. She had an inkling that it could be possible. Yeah. But getting from that point for her to see that no, it is not if it will happen, it is happening, and it's going to happen when you work on it. And I just knocked this. I told you.
Yeah.
The next one will be tired. Then knock the mic over.
That's okay.
So when she saw it, you can see like people's face light up that holy shoot, this could change. And when they see it and feel it, then now they have the pain, they have the gap, they have the vision. What are they going to do in the middle? And that's where you come in.
Yeah. Especially to that example where they just saw this future image. At first, like, wow, like this is now real. Like I can actualize this. But then it's like, I have no idea the process in between. So that's kind of the concept of the gap of you're in their pain, and then there's that end outcome, and you're there to bridge that. So I love that example. And I want to add to this something so important. And I think even us as individuals, as coaches and human beings, we ought to do a better job on this, is you have to correct the client and challenge them in the session to not use softeners. And what I mean by that is so much, like think about, and I don't know, I just pick on health because it's so easy. When you're like, I'm not that fat. And like, you grab a little roll on your tummy, like, oh, it's not that bad. So I'm like, what you're doing there is you're using a softener, like you're cushioning the blow so you don't actually feel enough pain, enough disturbance to agitate you to the point to take action, right? Or you only look at like the one sexy side of you in the mirror and you ignore the other. Or, if you look at
you were with me this morning in the bathroom. And it's not that bad. It's all right.
Yeah. Right. So we do that. And it's because we don't want to feel pain, like just as human, like that's part of our human nature. So what you'll hear when your clients is, when they're talking about their situation, especially when you're trying to draw out and discover and learn about them, they won't be real, not because they're dishonest son of a guns. It's just, I'm trying to draw out like we do that. So you have to be militant about catching it when someone else does it to challenge them to get real with it. And what you'll find, and like a biggest breakthrough, is when you get someone for the first time to be real and honest about their current circumstances. Because if they live in this, like, it's not that bad, it's okay, or it'll be better, or, it's wishful, hopeful, and it's almost like you're lying to yourself, you can never take extreme ownership of where you're at in your life and drive meaningful change. So you have to challenge them on changing the language, but more importantly is to quantify. And this is one of the most important parts when you're in this stage, is you have to quantify how long this problem has been going on. Because the length and the severity of it determines the value of your services, right? If this problem just started 2 weeks ago, like it's cool, like I'll figure it out, right? But if this has been a pattern, a behavior, a thing that's been in my life for 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, 2 years, like then it becomes so real, right? Because when you get that, you also have to ask them, what have you tried in the past, right? And what you find is, when they tell you what they've tried or what they've attempted, now you also know what their old method, old vehicle, like you'll hear this language in our industry, like what they've tried before, but it also helps you distinguish how you'll be different or how, your thing can actually get them the change. So I just wanted to add that context of when you're talking about the pain and you're identifying this, is to help them get real by correcting their language. And also to quantify how long this thing has existed for them.
Yeah, I love that you brought the language part, and it has to do with the bigger theme. Like if you actually look, especially the North American culture, which I'm the most familiar with right now, is that our language is set up to minimize emotional pain. You will call fat overweight or obese, like they're cover words, like you're fat. And it's not about body shaming, but we don't acknowledge where we're at when we're stuck and we're in a rut. We're like, oh, I'm just going through this phase. You've been in this phase for years. Yeah. It's not a phase anymore.
Yeah.
So it comes from like people don't even realize that they're using this language, and they're kind of dampening the experience of it. And so like I had a session yesterday with the salesperson, and like he is afraid. I can tell he's afraid, but he's using words like, "Oh, I get stressed." And I had to, just exactly like Anas is saying, I'm like, okay, so. And I had to get him to realize it. So I'm like, so when you say stress, what's happening? What's happening in your physiology? Oh, my lower back is tense, and my breathing is shallow. and all this stuff is happening, and my thoughts are all negative. Thank you, Ali. I got food delivery for my daughter. Thank you. So, my thoughts are all negative. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm like, do you know what that is? Not just at the level of thought, at a biological level. That's your fight, freeze, flight response. That's you're afraid. You're calling it stress, but let's call it what it is, and let's deal with that. And then when he saw it, he's like, holy shoot, I am. So let me acknowledge that. Now, how do we deal with that? Mm-hmm. Unless that person acknowledges it, they won't deal with it at the level that it needs to be dealt with, because it affects everything. It affects how they interact with the next client. It affects how they train this person. It affects how they feel with their family, all aspects of their life.
Yeah. And I just want to go an inch more tactical, because I want to make sure that everyone here has something that they can work on. In Faisal's example, which is brilliant, it might not be the time and place for him to solution that whole fight or flight, because what he asked at the end is like, well, what can you start doing? Right. Because as a coach, you're trying to move them positively forward, which is amazing, but that might be a way bigger thing. And maybe they come up with one thing. And what I would say in that situation after is like, assuming, this is ethical and true, and I know it is for Faisal, it would be, and that's exactly some of the stuff that we'll focus on in our program. Right. Or I would just assume it. So I would just say, yeah. And, as we start out, in the coming weeks, that's, we'll have a session on psychology on week 7 or whatever it is. Like, you could talk about how your program will solve it. You don't have to talk about the actual steps throughout the process. Right. So now they're like, oh, like I can get help with this. And here's this thing towards it. And I wanted to add one of my favorite questions to help in any dynamic, really, when a client or a prospect is sharing something, is what do you have to believe for this to be true? And a lot of that helps me draw out and helps them figure out, like, what is my belief? Because a lot of times you'll catch a limiting belief, and a belief is just a feeling of certainty. You'll catch something that isn't conducive. And a lot of times they're trying to go, this way, but then they have these beliefs that take them that way. And when you ask them, like, what do you have to believe for that to be true? They start seeing that there's like, things with their psychology that isn't supporting them, and isn't, and in that, again, for me, I'm like, these are things I definitely help my clients with. So I'm always like, planting that these are things that we focus on in the program. And I'll explain that at the end, right? I don't have to go and solution every single thing, because then it takes away from the overall objective of the call, and it's to serve the client, for me to figure out that I can help them, but also to identify gaps and pains and areas of improvements and things that we can help them progress through.